Hello and welcome to JavaScript Marathon, a full day of free online courses in some of the leading web development technologies and concepts. I'm Sarah Renaud with This.Labs, and I will be your marathon host. Our next trainer is Dane Grant, Senior Software Engineer at This.Labs. Welcome to JavaScript Marathon, Dane.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Sarah.
Dane will be presenting React Native end-to-end testing with Detox. He can be found on Twitter at DaneCanDo. We'll drop that handle in shortly. Special thanks to our sponsor, This.Labs. We offer personalized training programs to suit your organizational needs, ensuring you and your company stay on the leading edge. If you find keeping up with constantly evolving technologies a struggle and want to bring your team up to speed on one of the latest technologies, contact us today at hi@this.co to set up your complimentary needs assessment. We have a ton of upcoming events tomorrow, State of View with Evan Yu and other contributors. May 20th, 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 p.m. Eastern time. We also have State of Accessibility with a great accessibility panel on May 25th. Getting started with GraphQL is an intro free training on GraphQL with Moon Highway on June 1st, and then State of Angular Ecosystem is June 3rd with some of our core team members in Angular. If you want any more information, go ahead and go to this.co to sign up and to get more information. And huge announcement, we're coming back with JavaScript Marathon Week in July. So July 19th through July 23rd, we'll have a session a day. You can find more information soon on javascriptmarathon.com, so stay tuned for those details. And with that, I'm going to hand it on over to Dane.
Hello, I'm Dane. I am an engineer at This.Labs. And today I'll be talking about React Native end-to-end testing with Detox. Hello to everybody in the chat. I am a JavaScript developer mostly, working with React, React Native, and Node. And I can be found on the socials at DaneCanDo. And here's the game plan for the session. We are going to do a quick introduction to Detox. We are going to go over our little demo app that we have. And then we are going to move into Detox setup and configuration, followed by writing some end-to-end tests to cover our demo app. And at the end, we will have a little bit of time for QA. So if you haven't heard of Detox before, it is an awesome library by the team at Wix. And it is a gray box end-to-end testing and automation library for mobile apps. So you can see this little amazing demo right here. Actually runs your tests in iOS or Android simulator, which is really cool, and tests the functionality just like your users would. So what does a Detox test look like? Here is an example they have of testing a login flow. And right here, they are getting the email element and typing in their email, same with the password. They do the login tap, and then they are asserting that they should be on the welcome screen after that. So Detox is a cross-platform. You write your tests in JavaScript, and it supports iOS and Android, run on either simulators. Can run on devices. I've never actually tried that before, but that sounds pretty cool. Not yet on iOS. Automatically synchronized. It stops flakiness at the core by monitoring asynchronous operations, which is really cool and helpful. In the previous example, just to demonstrate kind of how that works, is after the login, Detox knows to wait for everything that's happening with that login process. And then once everything's done and all those async operations and everything are finished, then it'll move on to the next line here and make sure that it made it to the welcome screen successfully. So it's made for CI. You can execute your end-to-end tests on CI platforms like Travis. I've done it on Circle CI. They have a couple images for Circle CI, Mac OS, and an Android specific one. And you can actually run your tests in headless simulators on the CI, which is really cool. And test runner independent. So there's a bunch of different test runners that it supports. We will be using Jest in this application that we have here. And I believe that is their favorite. And then it's debuggable. So if you run into any issues, you will be able to employ some debugging on it. So our demo app, I have a repo put up on my GitHub, and we are going to be using this to add some tests here. I've also, right here, I have a link for a document, a Notion document, and it contains links to different resources and stuff related to the different parts of the presentation, kind of the walkthrough of the resources to help get started with everything. So feel free to take a look at that. So we don't really have time to do anything from scratch, but there is instructions here. The app is React Native. It's not an Expo app. So React Expo is not supported officially by Detox. So if you want to get set up with React Native, you got to make sure your environment's all configured and everything. This is the place to get the info on that. It has the different OSs and then instructions for the setup on Android and iOS. Just a note though that Windows and Linux do not support iOS. So since we're limited on time, I've kind of ran through everything and set up a few different branches on this repo. The main branch is a base demo app without detox or end-to-end tests. Then we have our setup branch, which is the demo app where I've configured detox for iOS and Android and started with an initial working test. And then finally, the test branch, I've added the different tests, testing the functionality of our demo application. So the app that we're going to be working with, we love pizza at this dot, and this demo app is a fictional pizza restaurant app. We have two tabs, menus and orders. And here on the menus tab, we have a list of available pizzas to order, or you could click up here to build your own pizza. The build your own screen allows you to select different toppings from a list here. You can remove the toppings, then you select your size. It'll give you the total price of your pizza, and then it allows you to submit your order. If you select a regular menu item, you'll be able to pick the size of the pizza and then submit your order. And then the orders tab has a list of all your orders. It comes pre-populated with a previous order with a status delivered by default. And then any new pizzas you order will show up on this list here. So some of the tests that we're going to try to write for this app here, we want to make sure that our user can navigate to orders and see the previous orders. We want to make sure that they can pick an item from the menu, select the size, and place an order, and also that they can create their own delicious pizza and order it. So next we are going to move on to setup. So if we go back to the Wix page here, they have a docs folder and they have this giant folder full of docs. So if you scroll down here to the README on the docs page, though, it kind of categorizes them for you a little bit, does them in an order that makes a little bit more sense and is easier to navigate. I've also kind of done this here in the doc that I shared on my repo. But yeah, it can be confusing to sort of bounce between the different docs to get everything set up. So let's start here on the Getting Started page. So first we got the environment set up. You need to have Node on your system. That's pretty standard. The first Detox specific thing we have here is it wants us to install this Detox CLI globally. So I'm already in my repo here, install that. And next it says install platform specific dependencies, Android and iOS. So that's kind of just getting your environment set up that we covered over here for React Native. So we're going to skip over that. And then we need to add the Detox library to our project using Yarn. So I'm going to add that. The next step is we need to set up a test runner for Detox. Jest is the recommended test runner. So we're going to go ahead and use that. And we're going to move to their comprehensive guide for Jest. So we need to install Jest and Jest Circus as well. Go do that. The next step is we are going to do a detox init here and let it know that we're using the Jest test runner. So it created some files in our project, an end-to-end directory with a config, an environment, and a first test file. And then we also have this detox rc.json file here. So everything worked as expected. Now the main file that we need to worry about after we do the init here is this detoxrc.json file. So I go to my editor and open that up here. So here in this file, we have a few different sections, configurations for iOS and Android. And these two sections, device and app, just kind of refer to these up here. So devices is the configuration for what kind of simulator or emulator you want your test to run on. So for iOS, by default, we've got iPhone 11 here. I'm going to change that to 12. And then for Android, you need to supply it an AVD name. If I open up Android Studio here, I can take a look at which ones I have available. I don't know why it's buggy on my machine, but let me close that out. Try that again. I believe I have a Pixel 3 with API 30 available on my device. Yeah, so here it lists all your virtual devices. That's the one I'm going to run my test on there. And if we go up here, here is the configuration for the apps that Detox is going to run the test against. So we've got iOS and Android. This is the most important part of the configuration here. We've got a binary path. And then I'm also going to add a build key. And this is going to tell Detox how it can actually build our app executable. So we need to make sure we get these set up correctly. And I don't ever remember the commands off the top of my head. So I'm going to go ahead and cheat here. Detox. Oh, I got to switch to the setup branch. So I'll start with the iOS app. So the path should be pretty standard, depending on the configuration you give it. So we're using Xcode build here to build our app executable for iOS. The workspace is our workspace file. You can find that in the iOS directory, configuration that we want to use using release, the SDK, and then the scheme. You can define different schemes. By default, with React Native, it'll just be whatever the name of your app is. And then it will build our app and it will be located at that path. Grab the Android path. And the build command for Gradle. So same thing here. The path will be pretty standard. We're building it with Gradle, build type release. And those are the main configurations that we need for Detox to work. One other thing that I want to do is I like to add some commands to my package JSON for Detox. I'm just going to copy those over. Got 4 different commands, one for building iOS, one for building Android, which is just calling Detox build with our configuration that we just set up. And then the same thing for running our Detox test. It's calling Detox test here. So we've got that set up. Let's go back to our docs here and see where we're at. I'm going to refer to this. So we're going to try to get an initial test running on iOS for now. So the iOS dev environment is a lot easier to set up initially than the Android one. The main thing you got to take note of is making sure that you have this Apple simutils binary, and you can install it with Homebrew if you're, well, you got to be on the Mac, but those are the commands right there to get that set up. And if we wanted to get our Detox configured to run tests on Android, we would move on to this doc right here, Detox for Android, but you'll notice there is quite a bit of setup for Android, and we don't quite have time. So we're going to skip over that whole process for now. I did include a link here to the commit from the setup I did on this demo app, and it includes the Android setup, so you can go ahead and look through this and see all the changes and additions that were made to get it running on Android. So we've got iOS set up. I already have the Apple simutils on my computer. We've got our Detox configuration done. So we're going to move on to writing a first test. And if we look at the demo app, the first screen of our app, the home screen, is the menu screen. So our first test we want to write just to make sure that everything's working correctly. Detox runs and it loads up into our menu screen. So I'm going to pull back up our project. And here's the end-to-end directory that it created for us. And it created this first end-to-end file right here, first test. These other two, you shouldn't need to worry about. They come pre-configured by default. I've never had to change those for the setup that I'm running here. So here we've got a few tests that came by default. There's a before all hook here that runs before all the tests. And that's where we have it launch our app. And then before each test that runs here, it will reload React Native. So we start from a fresh state for each test that we're running on our app, which is going to be pretty important to help avoid having flaky tests. So I'm going to take those two out, and we're going to update this one here. We want to load the menu screen. I'm going to go into my code and open up the menu screen. So here's our menu screen. I'm going to add a test ID menu screen. So most of the components in React Native, well, a lot of them have a test ID prop available that you can add on there, and that will be useful in your detox test. It'll help you find the elements that you're wanting to work with in your test. But do keep in mind that not all the elements have a test ID prop. And if you're working with your own components that you've created, you just want to make sure that if it needs a test ID, that you're passing it down properly. So we add that. Let's go back to our test file. So we're looking for our menu screen ID. So our test is going to find our menu screen, and we're expecting it to be visible once the app loads up here. So let's see if we can get this running on iOS. I'm going to install my pods. Hopefully all the configuration and everything worked, and we will have some tests running. Okay, I installed my pods. Now I am going to run my command that I set up in my package.json build iOS. So this should build our iOS app. It's running the command we set up in our config. That should take a minute there. Hopefully there's no issues. And what do we have next here? So next we're going to cover a lot of the stuff for writing tests. Does anybody have any questions in the chat while we kind of wait for this to run through? All righty. So while I wait for this, I will pull up a doc here. I've linked this in the bottom. This is an article posted by Wix that gives some best practices for writing your detox tests. So the first thing it talks about is restarting your app before every test, and that's kind of what we did here. And that each test should finish with an expect, with an assertion. So the restart's helpful that each test starts in a fresh state. This way your app doesn't get in a weird state while you're testing it, and you go on to the next test and it'll cause an issue and your test will fail. Then it also talks about tests hanging and timing out. I've ran into this before. So this is when the synchronization engine might detect something that's running in the background, some kind of async operation or some animation, and it'll just get stuck if it's like a long running thing. So there's a couple other docs here. One of them is troubleshooting synchronization. So if you ever run into any problem with that, this is a good one to refer to. I had one before that I was not able to debug. I couldn't figure out what it was detecting. So I actually had to follow this to disable the synchronization and do it manually. which wasn't ideal, but just worth noting if you ever come up against that. Let's see how our app's doing here. It's building. No issues yet, so that's a good sign. I think it's getting close to being done. It's doing the packaging. It also covers some really useful debugging stuff in here too. So if you plan on using Detox in one of your projects, I definitely recommend reading that article. It's full of really useful content. So we're writing our first test. We just did that. We added our test ID to our menu screen, and we're matching an element by that ID, and we're setting an expectation on the result. So that's kind of the general gist of writing our test here with Detox. Should have got one of those M1 Max. This probably would be quicker, right, Jesse? So it should be done in a second. Hopefully it'll work. Takes a little while to build and apps for Android and iOS. So one of the reasons why we just don't have time to walk through everything, but one other thing I want to mention. So I know I mentioned this is not an Expo app. Expo's not officially supported by Detox, but I have seen people using Detox with Expo, and I put an article here in the doc that I linked, and this has some information about getting Detox running if you're running it on the Expo app. So I haven't tried this myself, but it seems to make sense. Hopefully it works for people. So if you're working with Expo, definitely take a look at that. All right, our build succeeded. Yay. So now we're going to run our iOS test. Run our new end-to-end run iOS command. I've got my simulator open here. See, it just kind of reinstalled our app there, pulled it up, and it should load the menu screen. Okay, we've got a passing test for iOS. Good news. Close that out. Let's go back to So now that we've got it set up, we've got an initial test running. We want to get these other test case implemented here. So we've got our user can navigate orders. They can select items from menu and place an order, and that the build your own pizza functionality works. Since we don't have time to sort of live code all these, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the test branch. Okay, so now we're in the test branch where I have written the different test cases for our app. And here in this app end-to-end.js, I have all the tests written. But before we go through those, I'm going to go back here and close some of this stuff out. So we looked at writing first test, and we did that. So here's the most relevant documentation for writing our tests with Detox. We've got matchers, and this is how we find different elements and stuff inside of our app. So for instance, we added the ID to our menu screen, and we found it in our end-to-end test using the ID. You've also got label, which is an accessibility label prop. You can match by text. Do keep in mind that the text is case sensitive. It needs to be an exact string match between those. You've got type and traits. I don't actually use any of those in this demo. A little more niche, but they're available for you. We've got with ancestor and with descendant. So if you want to kind of select down and get a little bit more specific, those are super useful. And you can combine selectors together as well. You've also got at index. So if you've got like a list of items, for instance, our menu list, and you only want to select the first item, you could use at index. It does give you a warning here about the implementations of them. I have ran into this before, specifically trying to use at index for like a list of menu items. I was trying to click a menu item, like the second item on the list, and I used at index, and on iOS, because it used the axes, it clicked the wrong spot and it didn't work. So I had to find another solution for that one. Is the traversal on a tree in JSON format? I'm not sure what you mean by that. What traversal? Can you expand your question a little bit for me, Sam? So next we have actions. So these are the different actions we can take on the elements in our app that we pick with our selectors. We've got tap, multi-tap, long press, swipe, scroll. So you can just have a lot of control over your app between the matchers and the actions, which is really, really helpful. And then we have our expectations. So these are the types of assertions we can make against the elements in our app. To be visible, expect the element to exist, to have specific text or a label, or have a value. So these are the tools we're going to be using to write the test for our demo app here. Okay. So I think my assumption is that it would, the question is, we go back to with descendant or with ancestor, which route do you follow to get from the child to the parent? So if we select this child, my assumption is that with ancestor, it's going to find the first parent matcher. I haven't like tried it. It's possible that it could return multiple elements if this child has more than one parent with the same ID. I'm not 100% sure. That's a good question though. But the same thing with the descendant. I'll give you an example. I'm going to go through the test for the demo app right now, and I'll give you an example use for how I use them in here. So our first test is about navigating between the menu and the order tabs. So that's just this right here. And then we want to test that we can navigate to the order tab and view our previous orders. And it's looking for, yeah, let me walk through these. So the first one, the navigate between menu and order tabs. We have this ID on our menu screen. So we expect that to exist. That's the same thing we had on our initial test that we did. And then we have our buttons here. So if we go to our navigation in our app, you can find this in the React navigation docs, but you can add a test ID to your tab buttons using the options right here, tab test bar ID. So I added menu tab and orders tab to that. And if we come back up, we're looking for our orders tab and we're using the tap action on that. And once we tap over to orders, we have our orders list and we're expecting that to be visible. So I go to my orders screen. Here we wrap the list of orders in a component with a test ID orders list. And then we are navigating back to the menu tab by selecting our menu tab button and clicking it and expecting that our menu screen will be there. So, and then for this one, we are clicking our orders tab and we are looking for an order item in our order list that has a descendant with the text status delivered. So we have this order that's populated by default that's been delivered. So it's going to be an order item with a status delivered. So we're expecting that to be visible when we navigate over to the to the orders page. Yeah, I think you're probably right, Jesse. That's what I was thinking too. I think that's pretty much how any of the selectors work. It'll just return all the matches that are available. So in your example, if that child has more than one parent with the same selector, it should return all of them. So in this next test that we have, we're testing that the user can select a pizza from our menu, pick a size, and submit an order with it. And here's something I ran into where it didn't work as I expected as I wrote this specific test. So I wrote this right here. So I'm looking for, in the menu, I'm looking for, each item has an ID, which is like the pizza ID. So I'm looking for a supreme pizza in our menu, which is right here, with a descendant that has text of order. So I want to grab the button on our supreme pizza menu item here and then tap that button. So I want to go and order this supreme pizza. So what actually ended up happening when I did this was that it would click in the middle of our supreme pizza menu item here, which, just wasn't what I was expecting. So what I ended up having to do for this specific example was I selected the order buttons and then I narrowed it down to having an ancestor of supreme. So this time I got the actual button that had a ancestor, that had a parent with the ID supreme. So then that clicked through to the button there. So then we're wanting to select the size of our pizza. We're going to make an assertion of the price of pizza. We probably wouldn't actually do this in a real app, but just for like demonstration purposes. And then we go ahead with our order here. We grab our order button by ID and we tap through that. So this, the total matches by text. So we're grabbing the total by ID and we're matching its text, it should be $28. So after we click the order button, we are going to our orders page, and we're now looking, okay, there should be an order item with the Supreme Pizza text. So if I went ahead and ordered, so that's what we're looking for right there. What is the syntax for a selector? Could you provide an example? Which selector in specific? So these are the selectors or the matchers. You have an ID, so this is when you add a test ID onto a specific element, and that'll match it with that. You can match it by an accessibility label or a specific set of text. And you can also match it by element types or traits. And these are like additional selectors that we covered, the ancestor, combining matches together, so making it a little bit more specific. So I think the most convenient way to do it, and the most safe way to do it anyways, would probably be by ID. So just adding your IDs to different things. So if I go to the order screen, adding a test ID for our orders list, adding a test ID for our orders item. So now I can, if I go back to my test, I can just match it, all the orders by order item. So the last feature we're testing here is the build your own pizza feature. Pull that up. And here we are matching our items by text. So we're doing exact text matches right here. So we click through the build your own button, and then we are matching these items, pepperoni, basil, and bacon, by text here. And then we have two lists. We've got available toppings. So those are the available toppings, and then the ones that we currently have selected. So after we click through and add those, we're checking against the selected toppings list and asserting that those items that we clicked should be in that list now. And then also we're testing the price. So each topping is like $2 in the system. So yeah, we can make an expectation of that price here. And then we can remove elements from our selected toppings by clicking them. Say we decide to take the basil off because we don't want any green stuff on our pizza there. So we test that, and it should be back in the available toppings list now. And then we make sure that the total is updating correctly. And the last test we're doing is just another test of the build pizza. This time we're selecting some toppings, selecting a size, and then submitting the order. And we're matching an order item, and we're looking for one with the custom text to show that it's a custom pizza. I'm going to go ahead and start building our demo app here so we can actually run these tests that we have against the app and see what that looks like in real time. So again, I'm doing it for iOS because it's a little bit quicker for me right now. And I got my pod, so I'm going to build my iOS. So here we go small, we submit order, and now we have a custom pizza in the list there. It has the toppings that we added, price, so and between all the tools we have there for writing tests, you can do quite a bit. I know this is just like a small demonstration. Obviously, you can do a lot more with some of the other actions and stuff you can take on elements. This is just to kind of get your feet wet and get started. So hopefully this doesn't take too long. Does anybody else have any questions while we build the app here? So I'm just going to highlight some other useful parts of the documentation here while we wait for this. There's a lot, so launch Args is pretty helpful. So these allow you to pass different arguments from a set of tests in your application. One example of this is if you have different roles of users in an app and you want to run a suite of tests against a specific role, you can pass that role in through the launch args and load up a session for that role. Jesse said he lied. It returned the first match element and not an array. I'm kind of surprised by that because I think the other selectors without the with descendant or with ancestor return like a whole array of matches if there's more than one match, of course. So like if I select it on a menu item, I get more than just one menu item back. Okay, that's good to know though. Thanks for the question, Sam. That cleared up something I didn't know as well. Screenshots, this is pretty cool too. So if there's a, are you losing me? Oh, okay, I'm still alive. If there's like a failure or something in your app, you can configure it to take a screenshot for you of the state of the app when the failure happens to help you debug any issues that you're having with your tests. So it looks like we're almost done building our updated app here. Yeah, I mean, that seems like a safe assumption that it would get the closest ancestor or child, right? I mean, it'd be kind of weird if it didn't. So I think that's, I'm just gonna go ahead and call it right here. It'll get the closest ancestor or child, the closest parent or child. We're still talking about the with descendant or with ancestor. So it doesn't return an array. It returns the closest parent or the closest child. Which other ones? They've got a doc on mocking, running on CI. So if you need a little help getting it set up on your CI, there's some helpful information on there. And then some troubleshooting if you're having flakiness or issues with installation or synchronization, like I mentioned before. Those are all super helpful. One other thing, here you've got docs for the CLI, which is important. Configuration and device object. That's a good one too. So you got your detox and your device object. So your device object is like controlling your device, so restarting it, launching the app, terminating the app when your test suite's done, doing your cleanup. So a bunch of useful stuff there. You can shake the device. I mean, I didn't even know you could do all this stuff. That's awesome. And then the detox object, this is just stuff for your tests, like the before each, after each cleanup. So yeah, there's a lot of useful stuff in there. You just gotta kind of take the time to go through it. But this categorization here that they have in the README is super helpful. What would you say the average time to run iOS and Android in a CI/CD is? In my experience on a larger app, production app, it took about 20 to 25 minutes. Well, I'd say about 18 to 25 minutes to do a build and then run the tests. 5 minutes or like an hour. Closer to an hour for sure. It's a slow grind. So let's see if it ever. Oh, okay, it finished on mine finally. A little bit faster on my computer than it is in CI. So thankfully. So let's run it now and see if our tests that we have set up here are running correctly and just kind of what that looks like. Dang, that thing's fast. Awesome. So all our tests are passing here. I'm just going to run it one more time. So we navigate between menu and order, navigate the order and view previous orders. We order an item from the menu after that, and then we test the build screen. So let's just. Yeah, it's a pretty slow process. So this right here, you'll notice it's kind of giving you some feedback on like what's happening in the synchronization engine. So it says here the main queue is working with 2 items. So it's kind of hung up on something right now. That might be useful helping you debug when it gets caught up. This does seem to happen occasionally though. I'm not sure specifically what the problem is right now, but that's just another thing to note. I'm interested to see what happens. What's it working on? Oh, there it goes. Boom. Warp speed. Cool. Awesome. Well, that's about it. Pretty much everything that we covered here you can find on the repo that was linked. So we've got the 3 branches, like I mentioned, that have the different parts of the process mapped out, and the Notion doc with all the links to the resources. And if you have any other questions or you want to talk about React Native or testing with Detox, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. And we are on to the QA section. Does anybody have any more questions? Also, the trainings. Are you interested in trainings? If so, you should contact hi@this.co because there's some awesome people here that can do some awesome trainings.
Yes. Thank you, Dane, so much for that presentation. Doesn't look like we have any questions right now. If we missed your question or if you haven't asked it yet, go ahead and contact Dane. We did drop his Twitter handle into the comments. So if anything comes up later that you need some clarification on, or you want to continue the conversation, go ahead and follow him on Twitter. Thank you again so much for attending. Dane, thank you for your presentation. We have one more session with Morgan coming up soon. Jesse has one at the final hour. He has one more question. Dane, is the setup worth it?
Yes.
It was a confident yes. And applause.
You may not feel that way at the time, but it might save your butt later, and you'll be like, you know what? It was worth it, hopefully.
Excellent.
You know, what are you gonna do?
Awesome. We will see everyone soon. Go ahead and make sure that you go to our last session. If not, this is all on replay. So all of our sessions today are on our YouTube channel. So go ahead and look at those again, follow the trainers and ask any questions you may have. If not, we will see you in July. So thank you everyone for attending.